Hey, have you ever walked into a room, maybe a church, a banquet, a gathering, a reunion, and immediately started scanning the area to see who you might want to sit with? Be honest, we do it all the time. We look for familiar faces, people we feel comfortable around, people who seem more like us, and without even thinking, we also notice who we rather avoid. Maybe it's someone we think is too different, too difficult, or someone we simply don't trust. Now, let me ask you this. What do you think Jesus did when he walked into a room? Who did he look for? One of the things that has always amazed me about Jesus is that he didn't choose to sit with the so called righteous people. He didn't scan the room and say, where are the righteous leaders? Where are the ones who have their lives all together? No, he sat with sinners. He sat with tax collectors, people who were hated by society. He sat with the outcasts, the ones everyone else wanted to avoid. And that brings me to a question I was thinking about one day. Why? Why did Jesus choose Saul, who later became Paul? Why Paul, who was literally hunting down and murdering Christians? Out of all the people Jesus could have called to be his messenger, why did he go after someone who seemed like the worst possible choice? Then I thought to myself, I thought about another moment in, in, in the scripture. Do you remember when Jesus told his disciple that he must go to Jerusalem? His disciples were worried because he told them that there he would suffer, be rejected by the religious leaders, and ultimately be put to death. But Jesus didn't avoid Jerusalem. He walked straight towards it, knowing exactly what was waiting for him. Do you see this pattern? Do you see the pattern where whether it was sitting at a banquet with sinners or walking into a place where he knew he would suffer and die, Jesus didn't shy away from what others ran from. He didn't avoid the troubled people or the dangerous places. He walked towards them. So why did Jesus choose Paul? Maybe for the same reasons he chose to sit with sinners. Maybe for the same reasons he chose to go to Jerusalem. Maybe he chose Paul to show us something, to show us that no one is beyond redemption, to show us how to love people we think are too far gone, to show us that his grace is bigger than our past. Think about it. If salvation were based on what we do, Paul wouldn't have stood a chance. He was persecuting the church, approving the killing of Christians. By our standards, he was an enemy of the faith. But Jesus doesn't choose based on human standards. He looks at the heart not as it is, but as it can be through him. Paul's transformation is proof that God's grace has no limits. It's proof that God can take the most broken, most unlikely, most dangerous person and turn them into his greatest messenger. And if God can do that with Paul, what makes us think he can't do that with the people we avoid? What makes us think he can't do that with the people we judge in church? Now let's bring this back to us. When we step into church, do we scan the room like Jesus did, or do we scan it like the Pharisees did? Do we look for people who need grace, or do we look for people we feel comfortable with? Because if we truly following Jesus, then we should be looking for the outcasts. We should be sitting with the ones others avoid. We should be walking towards the people we think are the worst of the worst and seeing them through the eyes of Christ. Because that's exactly what he did for us. So I leave you with this question. Who is the Paul in your life? The person you think is too far gone, too broken, too undeserving of grace? Because Jesus saw something in Paul that no one else saw. And maybe, just maybe, there's someone in your life that Jesus is calling you to love in the same way. Let's stop scanning rooms like the world does and start seeing people the way Jesus sees them. Because that's the gospel in action.